And here we go. Humanities 101 and Nachos reminds you that you are enough. Now we join Dr. Dutch with the neuro-affirming conversation hour for outreach and support.
Welcome, Nacho Knots. And again, if you are new here, let me explain that name to you. Just for a second, I call you Nacho Knots, N-A-C-H-O-N-A-U-T-S. Not because it's a title, right, that you have to wear, but this place is more than just a podcast and more than just a class. It's a little mission. What we're doing here is exploring what it means to be human and how to build a life with more predictability, more balance, and more joy. We do that with warmth, with honesty, and with the deep belief that your brain is not broken and your brain is worth supporting. And because this episode airs on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 2026, I want to open with two lines that feel like both a warning and a lantern. Dr. King said, quote, "We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools," end quote. And he also said, quote, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that," end quote. Those are not just inspirational quotes. They're instructions for survival. They remind us that community is not optional, that dignity is not a private hobby, that what we practice in our small circles becomes what we allow in our larger world. So today we're going to talk about what it means to choose light on purpose. Not a fake, good vibes only kind of light, real light. The kind that tells the truth. The kind that sets boundaries without becoming cruel. The kind that refuses to return harm for harm. And we're also going to talk about the company we keep, because this matters for neurodivergent lives, especially for neurodivergent lives if you think about it, because environments shape nervous systems. Nervous systems shape our experience, and thus our experience kind of shapes how we experience reality, and thus everything. Your sleep, your focus, your patience, your ability to recover after a hard day, all of that connected to the nervous system. So when MLK calls for us to live together, he's also calling us to build spaces where people can actually breathe. So as we begin, I want to hold one gentle question close. When you leave a room, a conversation, a feed, a workplace, a friendship, do you feel more like yourself or less? Do you feel pulled toward your best or pushed towards your armor? Answer this in the comments for me today. So again, when you leave a room, a conversation, a social media feed, a friendship, do you feel more like yourself or less like yourself? Do you feel pulled toward your best or pushed towards some kind of protective armor? So pop that in the chat, pop that in the comments section, and then let's take a breath. If your week has already been loud and it's only Monday, if you're carrying too much, if you're feeling a little raw, you belong here. Let this episode be a soft place to land, and then together, let's practice what MLK taught. Let's work on driving out darkness with light. And let's keep choosing a life that makes room for everyone. And to bring those values down from a level of aspiration into a level of practice, I want to turn us towards something I find deeply, deeply grounding. What the research is teaching us right now about connection, about stress, and about the conditions that help human beings actually thrive. Because living together is not a moral ideal, it's a biological imperative. Our brains and our bodies are shaped by belonging, by safety, and by chronic threat, and the perception of the presence or absence of supportive community. So in the spirit of light, truth, and repair, let's look at the latest findings, not as cold data points, but as another kind of lantern. Evidence that helps us name what harms us, understand what heals us, and build environments that call forth our best. So with that lantern in hand, let's get specific about what conditions actually mean. And let's do it through a piece of research that fits the theme almost too perfectly. If Dr. King is inviting us to build communities where light can take root, then science is giving us surprisingly literal reminders that we are ecosystems, not islands. Our minds are not run on willpower alone. They run on energy, regulation, and support. They're shaped by the stress and safety, by the routines and relationships, by what surrounds us and what we have to carry. And this is why I want to pivot to a new Science Daily write-up from a January 5th, 2026 report. And it was entitled, "The Secret to Human Intelligence, It Might Be in Our Gut." And the details are fascinating, but the NACHOS point is simple. What we live inside of, including our environments and our inputs, can shape what we are able to think, feel, and do. And so here's a simple summary. Researchers at Northwestern University took germ-free mice, and these were mice raised without gut microbes, and they inoculated them with gut microbiota from 3 primates chosen on purpose. Humans, large-brained; squirrel monkeys, also relatively large-brained, but from a different branch; and macaques, right? Smaller-brained. After several weeks, the mice showed different patterns of brain gene expression depending on which primate's microbes they received, and the human versus macaque patterns in the mice resembled differences seen between actual human and macaque brains. Now here's the part that matters for our nachos conversation. The microbiomes from the larger brain primates, humans, and squirrel monkeys tended to turn up activity in genes tied to energy production in mouse brains. The human microbiome in particular boosted genes involved in oxidative, phosphorylation, one of the main ways our genes generate energy. Those shifts lined up with microbial pathways connected to how the body handles glucose, including glucose metabolism and glucogenesis. In plain language, the microbes looked like they were nudging the system toward the kind of energy supported the big expansive brain. So it connected to the system that it was perceived to have rather than the system as it actually was. And the researchers are careful about limits, and we should be too. This is an animal model. It's a small set of primate species, and these are early findings, so not a final story, but they raise a fascinating possibility. The gut microbiome may have played a supporting role in primate brain evolution by influencing brain metabolism. Not the whole story, not the only driver, but part of the ecosystem that made certain that there were kinds of cognition that were more possible than others. This is one of those moments where science backs up the very humane truth. Your mind is not floating in space. Your thinking is embodied in the world around you. Your attention, your memory, your mood, your stamina are not only character traits. They are biological processes that depend on energy, regulation, and environment. And if the microbes can shift brain-related gene expression in a controlled experiment, it reinforces a point we return to again and again in NACHOS. Support systems matter. Inputs matter. Context matters. This is why PBJ is not just a vibe. Predictability helps your nervous system spend less energy scanning for threats. Balance protects the basics that keep your brain online: sleep, food, hydration, recovery, movement, and social support. And joy is not just fluff. Joy is often a sign that your system has enough safety and enough energy to be curious, to connect to ideas, and to learn. It's the canary in the coal mine. And when we say your success is not always about grit, as we did last week, this is the part we mean. Sometimes the difference between I cannot focus and I can think is not a moral issue, and it's not a choice of will. Sometimes it is physiological. Sometimes it's environmental. Sometimes it is that you needed rest and that you did not get it. And because this is NACHOS, we do not leave the science sitting on the shelf. We turn it into something kind and usable. Not medical advice, just a gentle semester reframe. If you want your brain to work better, do not start by attacking yourself. Start by supporting your ecosystem. Eat something steady. Drink some water. Sleep as consistently as you allow yourself to. Build routines that you can actually repeat. Ask for help early. Reduce the chaos tax wherever you can. It's not about you being soft. It's about you being smart about what humans need in order to learn and thrive. And here's where we widen the lens, because this matters too. Sometimes gut health is not simply a matter of what you choose, what you cook, or how disciplined you are. Sometimes it's shaped by what has been done to you, what you've lived through, and what your body has had to endure. Stress changes the body. We know this. Chronic stress, poverty stress, trauma stress, discrimination stress, burnout stress, all of it can press on sleep, appetite, digestion, and inflammation. The inputs that shape your system are not always things you control. Sometimes your routine is disrupted by a job schedule you didn't choose, a boss's call, an email. Sometimes food access is limited by prices or accessibility. Sometimes home is not a calm, safe, warm place. Sometimes you are carrying grief, nervousness, anxiety, worry. Sometimes your nervous system has learned through experience to stay alert and stay on scan 24/7. And when your body lives in that kind of sustained activation, it's not surprising that digestion, energy, and focus can start to wobble. So yes, we can talk about habits and choices, and we will. But NACHOS also tells us the bigger truth. You're not failing because your body reacts to your life. If your gut, your sleep, your attention, or your mood feels off, it may not be because you're doing something wrong. It may be because your system has been doing its best to survive what has been happening around you, to you. And here's why I'm bringing this up today. In the very first stretch, and if we think about it, the very first stretch of the semester can be very stressful for people. And there's more research that puts real weight behind the idea that the beginning stresses you out. But it also reminds you that it doesn't say everything is your fault. It also does not say nothing matters. It sits in the middle. It says something much more honest. It says our biology is shaped by our conditions, including the people and environments we're surrounded by. In other words, sometimes the story of our bodies is also the story of our contexts. Right? So, change our environment, change our body, change our body, change our environment. Now, this next piece is from the December edition of the journal Nature Communications, and I want to tell you what I love about it and why it belongs in a nachos conversation at the start of the semester. It starts with a sentence that feels like a plot twist, right? Your gut bacteria may be shaped not only by our own body, but by the people we live with. Now let's think about that in relation to the last story. Not because their DNA, right, the people that we live with, jumps into us like science fiction, but because these microbes that we discussed, they move. We share space, we share surfaces, we share kitchens and bathrooms and couches and routines. We share little invisible ecosystems without ever voting on it. Now, the study looked at this as through a controlled way using rats, and what they found is pretty simple, but it's unsettling in the best of ways. The gut microbiome is influenced by your own genetics, yes, but it's also influenced by the genetics of your social partners, the ones you've shared living space with. If someone's bodies tend to encourage certain microbes to grow, those microbes can spread through close contact, and now they're part of someone else's internal world too, which then spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads. So your body is not only responding to what you eat, it's also responding to what you are on the inside, what is living within you, those little bits of life that are in your tummy. And that's the point that we have been circling to all episode and really throughout all 4 seasons of Nachos. Sometimes health isn't a personal project. Sometimes it's a social condition. Sometimes it's environmental. Sometimes it is relational. But it is surely all of those things. It is a social condition. It is environmental. And health is relational. The story that we get handed over and over and over again is do the right thing and you will be fine. Eat the good thing and you will be healthy. But real life is much more complicated than that. If your house is chaotic, if your roommate's houses or habits are chaotic, if stress is constant, if sleep is inconsistent, if the kitchen feels unsafe, if you're living in fight or flight, your body is not failing. Your body's adapting to the world it is in. And this is also why the shame story has to go. Because I remember, right, being a student and blaming myself for everything. I cannot focus because I'm too lazy. Can't get this done because I'm stupid. I feel off because I don't have enough discipline. I just need to buckle down. But what if you feel off because your environment is dysregulating you? What if your sleep is broken because the people around you are loud and unpredictable? What if your stomach hurts because you've been tense for weeks? What if your nervous system is doing exactly what nervous systems do when they are not receiving safety and routine? They're sending signals. And this is where PB&J becomes more than a classroom philosophy. Predictability is not just a nice feature. It's a protective factor. Balance is not self-indulgence. It's maintenance for a brain and a body that are carrying a real load. Joy isn't childish. It's often the sign again that our systems have enough safety to be curious and play. So what's the Nachos takeaway? If you want to take care of yourself, don't think in terms of only what should I do. Also ask, what am I living inside of? What are the conditions around me? What is being done to me through stress, through chaos, through lack of rest, through environments that does not seem to fit? Because sometimes the most powerful self-care is not a new habit. It's a boundary. Let me repeat that. Sometimes the most powerful self-care is not a new habit. It is a boundary. It's a routine. It's a reducing of exposure to constant dysregulation whenever and wherever you can. It's building small islands of predictability inside of a world that does not and will not offer that predictability. And if you cannot change the environment you're in right now, I want you to hear this gently. It's still not a moral failure. If you're stuck in a lease or a loveless marriage, it's information, it's data, it's context, it's your body telling you the truth. Listen, prepare to respond. In this space, we do learn content, but we also practice designing a place and an environment that respects the human beings doing the learning. And that requires sometimes patience. And that brings me to a small piece of research that is equal parts funny and strangely comforting because it makes the same point in a different key. Sometimes the thing that helps you access your strength is not more shame, not more grit, not bootstraps, and definitely not a harsher inner coach. Sometimes it's a tiny, low-stake shift that helps your nervous system loosen its grip long enough for your effort to come through. So a recent Science Daily write-up entitled Swearing May Unlock Hidden Strength study finds it shares research suggesting that swearing during a physically demanding task can help people perform a little better. Not because swear words are magical, but because they can change your state in the moment. The article highlights that swearing may reduce inhibition, boost confidence, and help people drop into a more focused flow state when a challenge is right in front of them. But here's the study in plain terms. In 2 experiments, participants held a tough chair-supported push-up position while repeating either a swear word or of their choosing, or a neutral word. The people who used a swear word tended to hold the position longer. Afterwards, their self-report suggested something important was happening inside of the experience. Less restraint, more confidence, and a more absorbed, committed kind of focus. Now let's hold that in a NACHOS frame. The takeaway is not everyone should swear. Swearing makes you powerful. The takeaway is that many of us are not limited by a lack of ability. We are limited by the invisible handbrake of self-monitoring, hesitation, masking, and fear of being too much or doing it wrong. A well-timed swear word can act like a tiny permission slip. It can interrupt the over-control long enough for your body to commit. And if swearing is not your thing, and you're in a space where it is not appropriate, the principle still stands. Find your version of that state shift. A sharp exhale, a power phrase, a silly mantra that makes you smile, a quick okay, go. The point is not the word itself. The point is the kindness underneath it, the kindness to self, the refusal to punish yourself into performance. Because what is it that we're practicing here? Not perfection, not constant productivity, just learning how to support the human being doing the learning with a little more grace, a little more compassion, and yes, when it helps, a little cheeky spark that says, damn it, you should fucking allow yourself to try it. And that's a perfect little bridge into our next story because it keeps nudging the same truth from a different angle. When we think about things as character problems, sometimes they're actually body problems. And when we come across those problems, sometimes the kindest thing we can do is trade shame for curiosity. Now, we talked about how you can shift your state, right? In this article, in this last article. But in an article that looks at the research out of Mass General, it looks at how doctors uncovered how in a rare condition called auto brewery syndrome, some people can experience real intoxication without drinking alcohol. So we talk about how our guts affect us, how our people around us guts affect us, how swearing can affect our mood, which can affect our guts. Now, we realize that some people's guts will literally intoxicate them. So some people, right, can get this real intoxication without drinking alcohol because certain gut microbes can ferment carbohydrates into ethanol inside the body. So I want you to get this straight, Nacho Nuts. Yes, we're going from swearing may help you hold a push-up longer to your gut might be brewing its own beer. And the Nacho's reason for bringing it up is not shock value. It's grace. It's understanding. It's a reminder that bodies do complicated things, that symptoms and systems can be misunderstood, and that learning the real mechanism can replace stigma with compassion and replace suspicion with support. So if our bodies are complicated and we think about that neighborhood of truth, all right, this next article reminds us that medical does not automatically mean risk-free, and popular does not automatically mean well-proven. On the 12th of December last year in Science Daily, they did a little write-up entitled Scientists Reveal the Real Benefits and Hidden Risks of Medical Cannabis. And it summarized a large review of research, like 1,200 studies, that asked a simple question. What does the evidence actually support, and where are we filling gaps with hope, with hype, or with cultural momentum? And the headline takeaway is not that cannabis is bad. The takeaway is more grown up than that. The strongest evidence is narrower than public belief, and the risks are real enough that patients deserve clearer, more compassionate guidance. Here's what the article highlights in plain language. Simple as I can say it. The review found clear clinical benefits mainly for a small set of pharmaceutical-grade, FDA-approved cannabinoid products, and for a limited list of conditions like certain seizure disorders, chemotherapy-related nausea and vomiting, and HIV/AIDS-related appetite loss. For many of the most common reasons people use medical cannabis, such as chronic pain, anxiety, and insomnia, the evidence is described as weak, uncertain, or insufficient, and clinical guidelines generally do not position cannabis as a first-line treatment for pain. The article also underscores risks that often get minimalized in casual conversation. Higher potency use in adolescents being associated with higher rates of psychotic symptoms and anxiety in some studies. A notable share of medical users meeting criteria for cannabis use disorder, and a potential cardiovascular concerns being higher with daily use, especially with inhaled or higher potency products. And then there's also the long-term issues and the findings that we're finding with the cannabinoid cramping and guts and with the hot showers, right? Now, I want you to frame it like this, Nacho Nuts. This isn't a shame story, right? It's not a warning. It's not Nancy Reagan. It's also not Cheech and Chong. A lot of people reach for relief because they are in pain. They cannot sleep. They're anxious. They're burnt out, and they're trying to function. Wanting relief is human. The self-care move is not pretending a coping tool is perfect. We know that placebo is real. But self-care is about being willing to ask with gentleness, what do we actually know? What do we not know yet? And what are the trade-offs for my particular body, for my particular life, in my particular experience? Compassion is not anything goes. Compassion is not nothing goes. Compassion is let's make choices with clear eyes and without self-punishment. And if you're hearing this with a little jolt of worry and looking around in your sock drawers and whatnot, let's add a little grace here. Information is not condemnation, it's support. The whole point of this kind of research summary is to help people have better conversations with clinicians and doctors, ask better questions, notice risk factors, and avoid the trap of thinking if it's labeled medical, it must be harmless. We've seen where that leads us. Or on the other side, if there are risks, I should feel guilty for ever considering it. Right? We never can see that middle road. So neither of these are the answer, because you deserve nuance, you deserve honesty, and you deserve care that treats you like a whole person, not a headline. So let's pivot from what helps and what carries risks into something that sits in a more tender, everyday lane. Because part of self-care is learning how to hold nuance without sliding into extremes. Not, this is a miracle cure, and not, nothing matters, so why even try? Just a steady middle path. Curiosity, moderation, grace. That's the middle path. So the next story, we've dealt with your gut. We've dealt with booze, we've dealt with drugs. Let's talk about candy. This story was entitled, Scientists Find Dark Chocolate Ingredients That Slow Aging. And it describes research from King's College London that found a link between higher blood levels of theobromine, a natural compound found in cocoa, and signs of being biologically younger than one's chronological age. The researchers used two large of European data sets, including Twins UK and Cora, K-O-R-A, and compared the theobromine levels with biological aging markers measured from blood samples. The core idea here is biological age. Biological age is not the number of birthdays you've had, it's the measure of how the body seems to be functioning over time. Often estimated using DNA markers like methylation, right? Chemical tags of DNA that change with age. And in this study, also telomere length, right? And these are the protective chromosome end caps that tend to shorten with age. In their analysis, people with higher theobromine levels tended to show biological age profiles that looked, quote, younger. The team also checked other cocoa or coffee-related compounds and reported that theobromine stood out as the one with the specific association. So what's the NACHOS analysis of this? Because this is where we have to slow down and refuse the clickbait impulse. Because I didn't just buy 50 pounds of dark chocolate. The researchers are not saying eat more dark chocolate all the time and that this will be for everlasting life. This is an association study. It can show a relationship, not cause and effect. It also matters that chocolate is a whole food product with regular sugars and fats, and life is rarely solved by a single compound. So let's not go searching for sources on theobromine. The responsible takeaway is not run to the candy aisle. The responsible takeaway is that everyday inputs and small, repeated patterns may be leaving fingerprints on our biology. And that's where self-grace, self-compassion, self-care all come in. Because when you're tired and stressed, you're trying to survive a semester or a month at work this quarter, your brain loves the all or nothing stories. Either you fix everything at once or you give up. Well, Nachos offers us a third option, a more saner, relatable option. And that's small, sane, relatable care. Care of self, care of home, care of environment, care of others. And this study is a reminder that those tiny things can matter over time. And that your body is not only responding to your motivation, it's responding to your routines, your nourishment, your sleep, your stress load, and yes, sometimes the ordinary pleasures and comforts that help you keep going. The little piece of chocolate orange. So here's the cheeky, gentle reframe that is not chocolate will save you. This is your body is listening to your life. And maybe that means letting yourself have one square of something you enjoy slowly without guilt, while also remembering that the strongest longevity strategy is not a hack. It's a relationship with yourself that is steady, kind, and realistic. So what did we learn in this episode? I think we learned a lot, Nacho Nuts. We learned it all in one place. We began with MLK, and we treated his words like what they are. Not decoration, but direction. We must learn to live together, and only light can drive out darkness. These are reminders that community is not optional, and dignity is not private. What we practice in our small circles becomes what we allow in the larger world. So we asked a gentle, clarifying question for the week and for the semester. And when you leave a room, a conversation, a feed, a workplace, do you feel like yourself more or less? Are you being called toward your best when you're with other people? Or are you being pushed towards armor? Then we grounded those values in something practical. The reality that, quote unquote, living together is not only moral, it's biological. Our brains and our bodies are shaped by belonging and safety, and they're strained by chronic stress of chaos and isolation. And that led us into research that made the theme almost literal. A Northwestern study that suggested that gut microbiomes may influence brain energy pathways, right? Those germ-free mice given microbes from different primates. The microbes from larger brain primates were linked to more activity, so forth and so on. It was an early, careful finding, but it pointed to a humane truth Nachos returned to again and again and again. Attention, mood, stamina, memory, they're not character traits always. They're biological processes that depend on fuel, regulation, and context. From there, we widen the lens because compassion requires honesty. We talked about stress and how it presses on the body. Sleep, digestion, appetite, inflammation, and focus. We named the unfair part out loud. The inputs that shape your system are not always things you control. Sometimes your environment is loud. Sometimes your work routine is broken by work schedules, grief, scarcity, trauma, discrimination, and burnout. So we removed the shame story. If your focus is off, your gut is off. If your gut is off, your sleep is off. And it's not because you're lazy or undisciplined. It may be because your system has been doing the best it can to survive the conditions as it finds itself in. And if you cannot change your environment, remember, it is not a moral failure. It's context, it's information, it's data, and it's your body telling you the truth. Then we turn that truth into something usable and kind. We looked at that study about swearing and how sometimes a tiny state shift can help you access strength that was already and always there, just hidden. And remember, this is not because words are magic, although I think sometimes they are, but because inhibition and self-monitoring can act like an invisible handbrake. The deeper lesson was not everyone should swear. Remember, it's stop punishing yourself into performance. Find a safe, appropriate version of yourself and let it shine. Give yourself that permission slip, a breath, a mantra, a goofy cue. And do it all with gentleness. And then we looked at the self-brewery in the gut. And again, this wasn't about shock. This was about compassion. We talked about how bodies do change. Real things get misunderstood. And when we learn the mechanism, we can replace stigma with support. We can stop turning symptoms into character judgments. And we kept that same mature, compassionate lens when we talked about medical cannabis. We practiced nuance. We held both truths at once. People seek relief because they're hurting, and evidence still matters. The most loving move is not hype, and it's not shame. It's clear-eyed care. What do we actually know? What is still uncertain? What are the risks for this particular body, this particular history, this particular life? Because the information is not condemnation. It's support. And then we ended with that dark chocolate story. Not as a life hack, not as a clickbait, but as a reminder about realism and moderation. The theobromine finding connection to a simple idea. Your body is listening to your life. Small, repeated inputs can leave fingerprints over time. It's not chocolate saves you. It's a gentler truth. All or nothing thinking makes self-care impossible. Small, sane, repeatable care is often what holds us. So, if we had to name the heartbeat of the whole episode, I think it would be this. Choose light on purpose, and let that light look like honesty, compassion, and practical support. Replace shame with curiosity. Replace judgment with context. Remember that your mind is embodied, your body is responsive, and your environment matters. This semester, we're not only learning content, we're learning how to respect the human being doing the learning. So before we close Nacho Knots, I want to shift us into affirmation mode. Not the glossy kind, the grounded kind. The kind that tells the truth and still offers a hand. Because everything we talked about today points to one steady message. You are not a machine. You are an ecosystem. Your focus, your mood, your stamina, your recovery, your hope, they're shaped by what you are living inside of. So if you've been struggling, let's end the episode by giving your nervous system something it can hold on to. Here are your affirmations for this week. I am allowed to need support. Needing support is not weakness. It is being human. My body's reactions are information, not moral failures. I can listen without shame. I can choose light without becoming hard. I can set boundaries and stay kind. I did not have to punish myself into performance. I can use gentler tools and still move forward. My mind is embodied. Caring for my body supports my thinking. Small, steady care counts. A drink of water, a meal, a breath, a routine. These are not trivial. These are foundational. I can trade self-judgment for curiosity. What do I need is a better question than what is wrong with me. I can be honest about my environment. If it is dysregulating me, that is real, and I deserve compassion. I can make one small island of safety today. One predictable step, one gentle boundary, one kind choice. I belong here, even when I'm not at my best, especially when I'm not at my best. And if you want one simple practice to carry with you into this week, make it this. When you notice yourself spiraling into self-criticism, pause and ask, is this a character issue or is this a conditions issue? Then respond like you would to someone you love, not like someone would respond to you or how you think you should be responded to. Respond to yourself as you would your dearest friend. So Nacho Knots, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing light with me, not the fake kind, but the real kind that tells truth and still refuses to return harm for harm. And as you step back into your week, into your evening, into your day, I hope you carry this with you. You do not have to earn grace by being flawless. Grace is part of what helps you become whole. Be gentle with your nervous system. Be honest about your needs. And keep building a life that makes room for you. I'll see you next time, Nacho Knots. You've got this.